When we came here, Paul Carrington was the dean, and he was only, I don't know, 3 years into his deanship or thereabouts. I think he came in '78, roughly, from Michigan. And he stayed 2 full terms, so he was finished in 1988. That's when Pam Gann became dean. And Paul Carrington is now, because he was dean 22 years ago, the things that happened in his deanship are now being forgotten, lost in the mists of time. But he was actually a great innovator. This is now regarded as a very international law school. That's all because of Paul Carrington. It's not that others didn't carry it on. Pamela Gann had exactly the same enthusiasm. But the innovations that got us into international and comparative studies were his. So the JD-LLM program was his idea. The JD-MA programs, which aren't necessarily international, were also his idea. The overseas programs, Hong Kong and Geneva, as it turns out, but originally originally Copenhagen, then Brussels, then Hong Kong and Geneva, were his ideas. And let me tell you how he thought about these things. Well, for one thing, I'm sure that he was influenced by Michigan's long tradition of international comparative studies. Among American law schools, it probably has the deepest tradition of international comparative studies. But I remember being in his office or being at a faculty meeting, I can't remember which, and he said, what would happen if we took some of our students and sent them overseas for a summer program, but not the kind of summer program that most law schools have, where they send their own students and their own faculty overseas, and they study the same things overseas that they could study back home with the same professors. No, what would happen if we took our students and mixed them up with a lot of students from other countries in the world and see what happens? That's the level of his precision in this. Let's just see what happens. So it was left to the rest of us to figure out how to do this, and eventually we settled on the format that we currently use. So in Hong Kong, for example, and I can't speak to Geneva with as much detail, but in Hong Kong, we have two-week semesters, 2-week terms, taught by 2 people from 2 different countries, teaching the same subject from different national angles. And we have students, about maybe 40% of them are American, maybe a third of them are from Duke altogether, and the remaining 60%, or at least 50%, are from all over the world, and especially the Asian region, Japan, China, Taiwan, Korea, Hong Kong, but also from Kazakhstan, Italy, who knows where. And indeed, and we also mix them up with roommates from other countries. And indeed, what he said turns out to be true, but in a more specific way than he said it. We teach classes there that we can't teach back here because you can't fill out a whole semester with the law of shipping. In any case, we don't have anybody on the law of shipping on this faculty, so we can take people who have expertise that we don't have on our faculty and teach. That as an example, we had a Thai teaching from Chulalongkorn University, teaching the law of shipping from the standpoint of preventing piracy and terrorism, and then we had, you're not going to believe this exactly, a Montenegrin from the faculty of Kyushu University in Japan, teaching the law of shipping from the standpoint of the nuts and bolts of it, the bills of lading and all of the rest. So the students in 4 weeks got shipping from sort of the high-flown, sexy piracy, terrorism, and from, how do you actually accomplish the shipping of goods from one place to the other? We had, at the end of that course, I remember the students came to us and said, you must teach this at Duke. And they were bitterly disappointed when I said, we can't teach this at Duke. We don't have anybody who could teach this at Duke. But they were thrilled, and they got it, as I said, from 2 different national angles, and we do everything there that way. So this was the way in which we implemented what Paul's very general vision was, and it's true in all of the other areas of internationalization, that he understood that American legal education was, and it still is in some ways, quite parochial, and it needed to be broken out of that parochialism.